I'm a little bit edgy because I just had a donut. Woo! I'm not nervous. I'm chill. Here we go, guys. Here we go. That's notable. Hey, I'm Greg Marshall. This is That's Notable. I'm going to be interviewing people who have been recognized as notable marketing executives. So welcome to That's Notable. I hope you enjoy the conversations. You're about to see a conversation with Stacey Steinberg, who's the Executive Director of Marketing and Communication at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. It's significant what she's done because for the first time ever, there was a department built within MyAd that was a standalone marketing communications department that serves the entire institution. So it's like creating an internal agency, marketing brand agency. And she didn't start in the brand marketing agency world. And so she's had to figure out how to build this thing, and they've made a massive impact. They've seen an increase in students, and that you're going to see why I think that magic is happening when you hear more about how she functions as an artist, how she moves through the world, and that evolution of herself. Like what I was observing in the conversation is how the art she creates, the life she's creating is tied in with the work that she's doing with MyAd. And so yeah, it's super interesting. You're gonna love her artwork as well. So yeah, this is an interview with Stacey Steinberg on That's Notable. I just want to acknowledge our sponsor today, which is water. Um, Everyone drinks water, don't they? So thanks to Water for that, for supporting our show today. So, Stacey, I have to start with your art.
All right.
I went to your website, StaceySteinbergArt.com, and I was having a blast looking at your stuff. And my favorite was the ghost page. When I was looking at this, I was stunned by it.
Thanks.
Like the choice of colors, the layers, the texture. It felt like I was walking through somebody's upstairs of their house that hasn't like redecorated in forever, and it like caught up to itself and was somehow beautiful again just by not touching it. But then it was like this collage with a story attached, and I expected it to have like an eeriness to it, but it ended up not feeling eerie to me at all. It was just beautiful.
That's a pretty great understanding and evaluation of the work. So these pieces are a little older, were made in a period between college and now. Um, they definitely have a bit of sort of your grandmother's attic
Yeah.
to them. There's, I would say overall, there's uh, an underlying and kind of overwhelming sense of nostalgia that permeates all of my work. Whether I am focused on the figure or a figureless image, I think there's still this sort of sense that the figure is evoked in the work. And so you get a sense of memory and this tangible narrative comes through, that there's something embedded in the work, that there's a story and a history, and that's represented through a house motif. These little girls' dresses, that's part of the Ghost series that you're referencing, and sometimes through an actual human form. Oftentimes they're silhouettes of children. Some of them are actual representations of my childhood silhouette.
Wow.
And so there's sort of this
Now I see it. Yeah.
this evolution of the work, where it's bounced back and forth between being realistically figurative and then sort of metaphorically figurative through the years.
Why do you think you have gone to houses? So there's other sections, we'll show some more, but there's the house body, part one. But even in the relics, the section that's named relics, there's a lot of sort of abstract house experiences, I would say. Why houses and why silhouettes?
So the Relic series is the most recent work.
Oh, okay.
And I think for me, it's
It's a little darker.
yeah, it is and it isn't. It's really I think you touched a lot on kind of the really poignant part of the layeredness of the work. And for me, I always want art to be accessible to everyone. So whether you come to it at a kind of surface level of I like the way this looks, or I'm really interested in the colors or the textures, I want there to be an opening for someone. Or if you have a really personal association to it, something in your history, um, tough family situation, divorce, family narrative, um, family structure, maybe that is crumbling. There's something there for you as well. And so when I was growing up, there were some family dynamics that were a little bit tough. And then as I was getting older, creating my own family structure, my own family unit, I did a lot of evaluation of what that looked like and kind of assessing what is the truth behind the word home? What is the comparison of house and home? What do those words mean? What are the what is the value that we equate to those things? And so how do I represent that through the images that I create? The most recent work certainly deals with that, but it also deals with kind of climate change and on another level, how natural disasters, tornadoes, hurricanes, tsunamis, sandstorms are affecting the way that uh, we build homes and how populated our country in particular is and where we're building homes. And so when you tend to look at coastal regions in particular and how closely people are building their homes to oceans and other bodies of water, uh, it's just this really interesting setup of sort of man and nature. And so combining this external narrative with some of the internal processing that I do in my own life creates these images that really open up a dialogue between the viewer and the work.
Yeah, that dialogue is interesting with, for example, on the relics, the collapse with the blue house,
Yes,
just
absolutely.
showing you this. It's like, so I think one person could look at that and hopefully we'll show it on the screen, but um, one person can look at that and think collapse, like everything's falling apart. When I looked at it, I remember, when my daughters were really young, we lived in a blue house. And what I saw was joy when I looked at it because when you drive past it, it just looks like it's a house that's sitting there. It's just sitting there, never really moves or anything. Never really moves. It never moves. It's a distinct, yeah, I can say that confidently. But what's happening inside is more like this. And like for one child, that whole part of the house turning sideways could be absolute joy. But for another, it's like terror, you know? So like transferring, that's what I was gonna ask you, like with your artwork, to what extent do you hope that somebody who's looking at it wants to know what you were saying versus whatever they get out of it? Like, do you enjoy getting to say, "Ooh, here's what was going on in me"? Because as a viewer, like as somebody who's appreciating it, I love that part. I love to know what an artist was actually thinking and feeling and experiencing and trying to communicate. And then that's like watching one part of the movie, and the other part of the movie is, like, what happened just with me enjoying it, and I feel like I can enjoy both of those, but f as an artist, like, where do you stand with, like, do you intentionally want people to ask you, or do you just let it be?
I've gotten a lot more comfortable with people inquiring. I've gotten a lot more comfortable talking about the work.
Why did it require that? Why was it hard to do?
I think when I was younger, because it was so personal, it was
Going back to, like, hard things that happened in your
yeah,
life? Okay.
yeah. I mean, the work was definitely an extension. I mean, it still is. It's definitely an extension of who I am. And so I was just having a conversation with someone recently about sometimes when you work in the studio as a fine artist, you can get so far into your own head that as a parent and as a professional and as a studio artist, you sort of have to find an ability to transition from working in the studio to going back to your life. And, the 15 minutes that I take to walk my dog after I leave the studio is a moment for me to sort of clear my head in a different way and transition back to being a parent or these other activities.
What happens if you don't come out of it? Like, how does that impact your
I
relationships?
don't think anything really it doesn't happen, but I think it can be, my kids are little, 10, 9, and 5, and they certainly sort of notice, like, "What are you thinking about, mom?" Like, "Where what were you working on?" And one of my kids, my 9-year-old, is really perceptive. "Mom, why do the houses look like that? What are they what are the houses thinking? Why do you make them that color? Why are they falling apart? Can I draw a house like yours?" And he's great. He's really interested in art and design, and I think that for me, when I was younger, I wanted people to be honest, I made work because I felt like I had to. I had to get it out of me, and getting it out on paper, making work was the most important thing to me. And if people wanted to look at it, great. But I didn't really want to talk about it with other people. Now I think I'm at the point where, life is great. Um, and so talking about the work gives me an opportunity to really have others see it the way I do, but also, again, to open them up to their own experiences. So if they see something like you just did, you see joy in this sort of tumbled, odd, puzzled together blue house that reminded you of a house that you lived in, um, that might be totally different than the next person. And there's something really wonderful about that art can do for someone, because when we take our kids to museums and they all stand in front of something and look at it, they're all thinking totally different things. And the formation of that memory for them could stick with them the rest of their life. And at a different point, each one of them, it could come back to them and they could go, I remember seeing that weird pink painting, or I remember, being intrigued by that sculptural form when I was 8, and it just has this distinct sort of, memory for them that, um, is inspiring or triggers a moment for them as they age that is visceral and important and, significant. And I think, our lives are really made up of all of these, relatively small moments that contribute to who we are. And then we have like a handful of really big ones. And we tend to focus a lot on the really big milestones, but it really is this compilation of lots and lots of small memories and small moments and everyday things that happen over the course of our lives. And I think when I think about working, professionally, in my studio and in my career, it's the day-to-day moments that have a lot of impact for me. And I think about the working relationships I have with my colleagues, the relationships I have with my family, the relationships I have with, the relationship I have with my studio work, and how I can have an impact on someone else. So I think that's kind of how I think about the work now. And so when my kids were little, I took a break from making work. I just kind of put the studio work to the side, and I would draw occasionally, but I really took a big break. When I graduated from college, I showed work for about 10 years pretty seriously. And after I had my first child, um, I was really focused on my children. And about 3 years ago, I came back to the studio and pretty seriously invested in that work again. And it's been really exhilarating to be back in it. And I was explaining to someone that it is, you know, that you need to be doing it when you start dreaming about the work, and
Yeah.
you can sort of see what you want the work to look like, and you get kind of antsy about studio time and making things
Mhm.
again. And
How are you different right now? Like, doing it after that break, what are you noticing about yourself that's different?
I think I'm less hard on myself. You
Wow.
know, I think there's less pressure. I mean, um, I don't have expectations about making work for anyone except myself, and I'm back to showing work when I want to.
Mhm. A little bit
And
ago, you said life is great, and that was after you've expressed some things, like, there was challenging times in your life too, and I think at this point in life after, you go around the block a few times and it's like, oh, when somebody says, like, "Life is great," there's a knowing in me that that doesn't just mean, like, things are fine, the Packers won and I had a good breakfast. It's like, okay, that means there's been healing, that means there's peace, that means the relationships are strong, like, there's all these layers as to what that means when somebody says that sincerely. So why is life great? What do you attribute that to? Coming from challenges, school, you go professional life, which, I think everything we're talking about right now is glimpses into who you are and why what you're doing is looks like it does from a successful standpoint. But like this, like going to that deep part of why is life great? What do you attribute that to?
I think um, in my 30s, there was a whole period of time where, in my 20s, I'd graduated from college and sort of trying to figure out, what do I want to do with this degree? Had this very successful presence as a fine artist, showing work in galleries, selling a lot of work, um, but couldn't quite figure out what I wanted to do, who I wanted to become, and professionally, but also like what it was more than that. It was sort of what is my identity, as a maker, as a human, um, and maybe some of that goes to value. What is my value? Um, and I think, interestingly, I wasn't someone who was sure I wanted to have kids, and now I have 3. So, there was this period of time where I was working, so I graduated from MyEd and, took a job after graduation as an admissions counselor, thinking I would do it for a couple of years, maybe at the most, go to graduate school and teach after that. Um so that I could continue making my work, and, that was sort of the plan. Um, Life led to some other things. I decided to stay and, ended up working in undergraduate admissions for several years and then leading the undergraduate admissions at MyEd. And so the first kind of half of my career was spent in working in recruitment. And I remember there being a sort of formative moment of going, what is it about higher education that I really like? Why am I doing this? I just got out of school. I was in school my whole life. Like, why am I still here? Um, and I met a student who was a local student who came in, brought his portfolio, and came in by himself. No family, no parent, no guardian with him, and put his portfolio on the table and said, "It's the only school I'm interested in going to. Here's my work. I don't know if it's good enough. I'm really interested in graphic design. Um, what do you think? And we talked about the work, and great student, as far as the work went, but had some family challenges, and the student kept coming back and kept coming back with new work, kept sort of doing all the things that we talked about, and turns out that the student really had no family support. The student was working a full-time job in addition to going to high school, kind of doing it all on his own. And this is a student who ended up graduating from MyEd and becoming incredibly successful and is just doing amazing things. Um, and I think back to that moment about a few things. One being that it not only made me realize sort of the impact of higher education, but it really made me think about why marketing was something I was interested in because this was a student who came from a low income family who had very little support and really looked at MyEd as a school that potentially was not right for them. They were really interested in it, but thought they would be an outsider. And it gave me pause because we were spitting distance from their neighborhood, and perhaps we were not being perceived as the kind of institution we actually are. And so it helped me see in a way that the marketing that we do is so incredibly important to help people understand who we really are as a college, who higher education really can be for students. And so that was sort of a pivotal moment in thinking about, is higher education something I'm really interested in? Is marketing something I'm really interested in? Um, but I think, as I entered kind of into my 30s and thought about where do I want my career to go, um, we ended up having our first child. We shortly after that had our second child, kind of unexpectedly. And then it was like, I think some family stuff just sort of like fell into place. And career wise, it was like things had sort of settled. Like I felt like I had figured out where I could really have impact and helping students realize that they could turn something that they were incredibly passionate about into a profession, helping them see that being creative can become a career, um, both in the work that we did in recruitment and then now in the work that we do in marketing. That for me was sort of the turning point of going, this really has value. This has meaning for me. And Myatt is not going to be the right college for every student and every family. And, it's probably not the right college for 98% of students in the country. But for the students and families that it is the right college for, the work that we do is so incredibly important and it has value. And I think when I wake up in the morning and I go to work every day, I think about how my staff, my team and I work together and we serve not only our internal, departments and colleagues, but also the way that we reflect the work that our students, our alumni, um, and the departments in the college, what they're doing to the public community, um, in a way that is authentic and really mirrors the institution. It just has tremendous value, and it has value in a creative economy like Milwaukee's.
So when you reflected on like the satisfaction of making an impact and ultimately being valuable as yourself. You get to be
Yeah.
you, you get to come be you, and that's valuable to an institution that's doing good things. It's making a real impact in kids' lives. Knowing what you know now about life in that regard of like how satisfying that is. Do you feel like if you could be a full-time artist only making this art and this is supporting everything, would you in a heartbeat say yes, or would you pause and say like, I don't know, like yes, but I also want to be just valuable in this way still somehow? Would you disconnect and just do this like without hesitating?
For me personally, I don't know. Um, because it's hard. It's a hard job. Being an artist is a hard job.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You
Like,
know, and it's hard because it's mentally hard, it's emotionally hard. Um,
your entire well-being feels like it's tied to subjective responses to a thing.
it
You just
is,
put
and
out
it is, and it's definitely it's a lot of internal pressure, to and I think, like I said earlier, I think what's different now is that I really am in a place where I have a lot less of that internal pressure about, is this good enough? Is it is it going to sell? Are people going to like it? I care a lot less about that
And
than I
part of that's
did
because you have the
25.
stability, right, of your
Right,
job, and
right, yeah.
and you actually like it. You
Yes,
you can be you in your job.
yes, and I think I'm also okay with being vulnerable in my work, and I think I was vulnerable in my work when I was 25, but I was pretty scared of it,
Yeah, you talking
you
about
know?
art?
Yes,
Yeah.
mhm, and
How
so now,
what does vulnerability look like in your marketing work?
great question. I think in the work that we do as a team, I think that is us taking risks. Um, I think it's us pivoting from the traditional path of, we've been doing this for the last several years, but we're not seeing tremendous gains, or um, we're not seeing this move in a tremendously different direction. So let's pivot, 180 from here. Um, and the risk could be high, but the rewards could be greater. I think that we're small, obviously. So those risks can be pretty high to jump off of one path and onto another when you're not when there's not a lot of elasticity to it. But I think for us, it's been great because so a little, just a kind of brief history. Maya has not had an independent marketing and communications department in its existence until about 2.5 years ago. So communications as a area was part of the institutional advancement office. Prior to that, marketing was purely enrollment, communications and marketing work as part of the undergraduate recruitment area. And so about 2.5 years ago, we had some internal conversations about how the organizational structure would work, and decided, to really serve the college in the best way that we could. We would form this sort of standalone marketing and communication department. And
Were you a part of making that decision, or were you just asked to lead it when it was decided?
no, as part of the conversation, along with Jeff Morin, our president, our vice president for enrollment management, and our vice president for institutional advancement. And it was a bit. I think it was a bit anxiety inducing for everyone, because it was going to be a very different structure. Um, but it really we really looked at it from the standpoint of, this is a department that will be in service to the college. And it's the mantra that my team has lived by. I think if anything, we're guilty of not saying no enough.
Does it function then as like an internal marketing agency for the school? So
Yes.
like departments, whatever, anybody needs something.
Yes. So we serve institutional advancement, admissions, the galleries, the academic offices, student services, and then pretty much anyone else who comes to us with a project or a request. We handle web, digital, print, social media.
How much have you tried to build all of that in-house versus working with agencies?
We do all of it in house.
Yeah, wow. So that's a significant team to build. What kind of characteristics, qualities of people were you looking for in building that team?
Flexible. Our team is a group of folks who are incredibly committed, um, really willing to try anything. And I would say they're great problem solvers, really flexible individuals who are able to pivot from project to project. They're able to multitask. At any given time, our team is probably running 8 to 10 different things all at once. And so, with a small staff of folks, I think it's really important that they're nimble and just open to embracing the experience of what various areas in the college have going on. And it can be events, it can be academic experiences like critiques or project kickoffs. It can be gallery openings, or we can be writing sponsorship documents, or preparing tear sheets for the advancement department. So it's just and then we can be preparing talking points for the media and a press release on something like receiving the Title III grant. So it's just, day to day, I think we are kind of really open to whatever is coming at us, but it keeps it really exciting.
But you didn't come up leading in a marketing agency. You came through the school and admissions, and so your job right now, is it primarily running that group, or is it like what part of the creative side or the vision casting? What are you most consumed with?
So my job right now is, I would say, most of my job right now is project management, to be honest, and it's a lot of funneling the work out to my team, which includes a digital content manager, a graphic designer, a communications specialist, social media. So, really aligning the right folks with the right projects. And we're doing, when we formed the department, we did a brand refresh. We did use an external agency for that work. We,
When did you do that?
2022, early 2022. So we didn't want to walk away from Maya's current brand in terms of our logo, or kind of our tagline, or sort of our brand, you know like our content, architecture in general. We still feel like it has a lot of life to it, and we really base a lot of our content and our messaging around it. But it needed some refresh in how we were using it, and so we looked to an agency that is co-owned by an alumni who has roots in Milwaukee and New York City, and worked with them to do that refresh work, which was really great from the standpoint of, this is a person who has had the Myatt experience, who continues to have engagement with us, and really has an understanding of who we are. And, first and foremost, from this, we were looking at it from the prospective student uh, perspective. And so we did that work early on, and then have really been kind of focused on how that influences the work that we do.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm just connected some dots in my head. Like one question about brand, and then I just want to throw you some quick like asking you advice to students or people getting into marketing. Before I do that, you've experienced the hard work of creating, your own inner world, your own family, your own life, and that's art. That's a thing. Emotional intelligence, healing, intellectual, IQ, skill development. You've been doing all that stuff personally, and then you're helping an institution, a school, to create its brand and say what it's becoming and become what it's saying, and you're influencing that story. In what ways do you think the evolution of a person is similar to the evolution of a company's brand? Like, how are they similar and how are they dissimilar?
I think you know, we talk about our website in particular in that it needs to be a living thing that if we stop working on it, if we stop updating, if we stop really paying attention to it, that it's sort of dead in the water. Um, I think brands have something similar, I mean, of course, there are tried and true brands. You look at something like Nike or Google, Apple, but even those have sub brands, or they have, Google has kind of its fun, you go to their webpage and they're always doing, fun gifts with their logo. And there's always something kind of silly happening with it just to keep you engaged. And I think with branding, you always want there to be kind of an evolution to your brand that is really a mirror of who you are at its best. So, in admissions, one of the things that I frequently talked with my team about when I was leading that team was, the best job you can do is be a mirror of the institution. It will help us recruit the right students, it helps retain them to the institution, and it will help them graduate because finding your college fit is so important. And you do that by finding an institution that really aligns with your goals, your interests, the social experience you're looking for, the location you're looking for. And so, you really don't want to tell a student about things about a program that you don't have, or, facilities or technology, those kinds of things. And so you just want to reflect what's there. I think brands are really like that too. The more authentic and genuine a brand is, um, I think the more people respond to it. And in the case of higher education, a creative education like Maya is one that it is personal. It is subjective, in the same way that, we talked about my work. And so telling the stories of our students, telling the stories of our faculty and our alumni, it's one way of really helping prospective students and their families understand who MyEd as an institution and as a college is and what we have to offer. It's not the only way, but I do think that that's an important opportunity. And I think that as people, the way that our brands grow is how we tell our story.
Mhm. What would be one, you can change your mind later, but the one piece of advice that you would give a student who's graduating this year that, if they just meditate on that, practice that, they have a high likelihood of things turning out well? What's one thing?
I think it's okay to change your mind. You know, I don't know that I would go back and choose another profession or choose a different major even. My major was drawing, which is not even a major that MyEd offers anymore. All of MyEd's fine art majors are now one fine art major. Back when I was a student, you could choose an individual fine art major. So my major was drawing. Um, I took some printmaking classes, I took some sculpture classes, I have an art history minor. But I do think that there's a lot of pressure on young people to make a decision and sort of stay with it. And the world isn't exactly built for that anymore. I think we see a lot of Gen Z being labeled as unprofessional and job hopping, and sort of being categorized in this unprofessional way. And I'm not sure that that's exactly the right labeling or stereotyping. I think that in some ways it's more that the world is shifting and we need to find a way to help young people understand that there are various paths to careers and that the way that we train young people for professions may need to shift as well. And that can happen as early as in the K-12 system. The way that you and I traditionally came through K-12 education may not be working anymore. That functional sort of go to school and then go directly to college and then get a job and stay in it for 20 or 25 years or stay in the same profession. Um, you know, we I mentioned earlier sort of the linear trajectory. That is not necessarily
Yeah.
the way to go for some individuals. And so I don't have an answer for how we do that, but I do think that some the way that the world is moving in terms of technology and what some higher education institutions are offering in terms of career pathways and looking at how young people are learning. I think there's a lot to explore there and creating new opportunities for young people.
What's the most encouraging thing that you've observed about Gen Z?
I think they're open-minded. I think they're really open to technology. I think they're really open to exploration. Um, I think you put something in front of them. It can be a tool, it can be a resource, and they really want to exploit it. They want to try it. They want to see, can I break it? What does this thing do?
Yeah.
Can I take it apart, and put it back together? There's something inherently curious about them. I see it with my own kids even, and when I was a child, I'm not sure I had as much of that. I was a little more cautious, and I think there's something really good about that because I think that's where innovation comes.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of us understood even how big, like as a kid, I didn't know how big the world was. I kind of did, but didn't, and just kind of stayed in a path. Yeah. So, couple quick things. This isn't a quick one, but you quick thoughts on it. How does AI art generation impact? Like, where do you think that's going? Like, is that something to celebrate and keep exploring, or will it strip us of human art? Will it kill art?
I think AI has a lot of challenges when it comes to the art world in particular. I also think it presents a lot of opportunities when you look at manufacturing, when you look at you know design in general. I think there's just a lot of unknowns at this point, and it
Yeah.
requires.
Do you feel more concern or more excitement about AI?
I think probably I'm a little more in the concerned camp at this point, but that could shift.
Yeah. My if one of my I have 4 daughters. If one of them was interested in graphic design, illustrating art in general, what advice would you give her? In light of AI, in light of all the things.
In my opinion, there is not ever going to be a world where human created work is not needed. The the ability for humans to generate work, creative work, um, that is on point, that is intellectual, that is really aligned with what a client is looking for, I think is going to be unmatched by a computer. And so, or at least for a long time. And so I think human created work is going to be necessary in the long term. And so that would be, I think, my first sort of layer of advice. My second layer of advice would be, the example of, I suppose, product designers and engineers. There's always going to be a collaborative experience when we think about how creative is made in most industries. So um, the toaster that you use, in the mornings was created not by a single person and not just by a factory that manufactured it, but by a product designer who said it's going to look great if we do X, and by an engineer who said we have to fit all these components inside to make it work, and then by people who work on the factory floor and who actually work with robotics or machines to build it and manufacture the piece. Um, and then, of course, distributors and retailers. And so there's a whole chain of folks who get that toaster from concept to your home. And I think all levels of creative, illustrators, animators, product designers, have some piece of that experience. And so technology is an incredible tool and one that will continue to influence the work that we make. But I think the human hand in that is going to continue to be so important.
Yeah. Well, as a way of ending, I want to point out we started this because I saw other people who were nominated and selected as this notable marketing executive in the Biz Times, and we were talking, and the question came up, what would happen if we just interviewed a bunch of people and found out not just what's notable about others from a professional standpoint, but what do we see that's notable? And I think it was so obvious with your artwork that there's something very notable. What I see as notable about you on a deep level is the level to which you've taken seriously the work in just your own soul, in a sense of like seeing like the children in here, and like there's like a relationship. I'm over saying this, maybe tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you caring for your younger self results in you like being at this point where you're like, no, life is good, and I'm more comfortable talking about where that's coming from. There's like a piece inside of you that I see being worked out in the artwork, but then also like all of you being trusted with by my ad to launch this new thing, a new way of functioning in marketing. And you having the peace and ability to step into that, the confidence to step into that, and to see amazing things happen. I just think it's cool the soul that you're doing it with, and that the world gets to experience it, number one, in watching my ads brand, but we also get to see it in the artwork. And I think that that's a really cool collection of albums, if you will. As an artist, like you get to see the wall of albums that you've created, and creates a much more full picture. And I just think that's a gift that we get to see that. So thanks for letting me interview you and for us to get to witness that.
Thanks. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's that. Once again, thank you to our sponsor, Water. Um, what was that line again? We all drink water, don't we? Yeah. All right, that's Stacey Steinberg.